Title: The FAA just grounded me at 62. Here's why. I never thought this day would come. Not like this. After more than 3 decades in the cockpit, thousands of hours, dozens of aircraft, from simple trainers like the Cessna 150 and Piper PA-28 Cherokee, all the way up to sophisticated machines like the Pilatus PC-12 NGX and HondaJet Elite 2, the FAA grounded me. And the reason might surprise you, because it wasn't a crash. It wasn't a violation. It wasn't even a bad landing. It was my age. Today, I want to tell you the full story. What actually happened, why it's happening to more pilots over 60, and what every pilot, especially those getting into aviation later in life, should understand before it happens to them. And I want to hear your thoughts too, because this conversation matters for all of us who love flying. Let me take you back a few weeks. I had just returned from what should have been a routine trip. Nothing fancy, just a relaxed cross-country flight in a Cirrus SR-22. Smooth air, clear skies, the kind of day that reminds you why you fell in love with aviation in the first place. If you've ever flown a modern SR-22, you know the feeling. Comfortable speed, great avionics, a plane that almost feels like a flying luxury sedan. Everything about that flight was perfect. And yet, 2 weeks later, I received the letter. Now, if you're watching this, and you're in your 50s, 60s, or even 70s, this part is important because the issue wasn't flying skill, it wasn't experience, it was medical certification. For those who don't know, pilots in the United States must maintain an FAA medical certificate to fly most aircraft. And as we age, those requirements become stricter. More frequent exams, more scrutiny, more paperwork. When I was younger, renewing my medical was easy. Show up, vision test, blood pressure, done. But once you pass 60, things start to change. And at 62, the FAA starts paying very close attention. The irony is, I was flying better than ever. Experience does that. Over the years, I had flown everything from classic trainers like the Cessna 172 Skyhawk and Piper Cherokee 140, to high-performance aircraft like the Mooney M20U Ovation Ultra and Beechcraft Bonanza G36. I'd flown turboprops like the Daher TBM 960 and Pilatus PC-12. Even had the chance to sit left seat in a Cessna Citation Longitude once. And what you realize after all those hours is something interesting. Flying isn't just about reflexes. It's about judgment. And judgment tends to improve with age, which is why so many experienced pilots continue flying safely well into their 70s. But here's where things get complicated, because the FAA doesn't just evaluate how you fly. They evaluate risk. And risk changes with age. Even if you feel perfectly healthy, even if your flying skills are sharp, even if you're still landing smoother than some 35-year-olds in a Cessna 182 Skylane. My examiner noticed something during the routine medical. Nothing dramatic, just a small cardiovascular concern, the kind of thing many people in their 60s deal with. But in aviation, small concerns can trigger big consequences. Instead of renewing my certificate immediately, the FAA deferred the decision. That means more testing, more documentation, and in the meantime, you're grounded. Now, I know what some people might say. Well, that's just safety. And to be fair, they're not wrong. Aviation safety regulations exist for a reason. We all benefit from them. But when you're the one sitting at home, watching perfect flying weather outside, knowing your airplane is sitting quietly in the hangar, it hits differently. The strange thing is how sudden it feels. One day, you're planning your next trip. Maybe a scenic run in a Diamond DA-40 Star. Maybe a relaxed backcountry adventure in something like a Cub Crafter's X-Cub or Aviate Husky. Maybe even dreaming about someday stepping up to something serious like a Piper M600 SLS or Daher TBM 850. And the next day, you're not flying. I remember sitting in the hangar looking at a friend's Cessna 210 Centurion and thinking, I've flown aircraft faster than this, more complex than this, more demanding than this. Yet the thing that stopped me wasn't the airplane. It was paperwork. Now, here's the part that many newer pilots don't realize. The medical process can become the biggest barrier to flying as you age. Not skill, not money, not training, medical certification. And if you're someone in your late 50s or early 60s just getting into aviation, this is something you should understand early, because it affects the type of flying you may want to do. For example, many pilots transition to aircraft that are easier to manage and operate, something like a Diamond DA-62 or Piper Saratoga, aircraft that offer stability, comfort, and predictable handling. Others choose simpler recreational flying, a classic Piper Cub, a light sport aircraft like the Pipistrel Virus SW, or something rugged like the Zenith CH-750 STOL. And honestly, those airplanes can bring just as much joy as a fast turbine, sometimes more. But here's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Is the system too strict, or is it exactly right? Because the FAA's job is to protect everyone in the air and on the ground. But experienced pilots bring something extremely valuable to aviation: perspective, calm decision-making, and thousands of hours of real-world knowledge. So I'm curious what you think. Should the FAA treat experienced older pilots differently? Should medical certification rules change after a certain number of flight hours? Or should safety always come first no matter what? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your perspective. While I was grounded, I spent more time just walking around the airport, and that's when you start noticing the incredible variety of aircraft out there. A Vans RV-10 taxiing past, a Quest Kodiak 100 preparing for a cargo run, a pair of Tecnam P2006T trainers practicing pattern work, and on the ramp, a sleek Honda Jet Elite preparing for departure. Every airplane tells a story. Every pilot has their own journey. One afternoon, I watched a young pilot climb into a Cessna 150, probably building hours, maybe dreaming of someday flying something like a Falcon 10X or Gulfstream G800, and it reminded me of my own first flights, back when even a simple Grumman AA-1 felt like the most incredible machine in the world. The truth is, aviation changes with time. Your aircraft change, your missions change, and eventually, your relationship with flying changes too. Some pilots step into bigger and faster aircraft like the epic E1000GX or Lancair 4P. Others go the opposite direction, slow flying, grass strips, backcountry adventures in aircraft like the Kit Fox Series 7 or Just Aircraft Super STOL. And honestly, that kind of flying might be the most rewarding of all. Right now, I'm still waiting on additional medical review, more tests, more reports, more patience. And I don't know yet how the FAA will decide. Maybe I'll be back flying my usual cross countries, maybe I'll transition to lighter aircraft, or maybe my flying will become something different entirely. But one thing hasn't changed: the love of aviation. That never goes away. And if you're someone watching this who is thinking about learning to fly later in life, here's my advice. Don't wait. Start now. Even if it's just in something simple like a Cessna 172 Skyhawk or Piper PA-28 Cherokee. Those first few hundred hours might become some of the best experiences of your life. Because one day, whether you're 62, 72, or 82, you might find yourself looking back at your flying career. And what you'll remember most won't be the aircraft, not the speed, not the technology. It will be the moments, the sunrise departures, the quiet cruise above the clouds, the feeling of freedom that only pilots truly understand. So now I want to ask you something. If the FAA grounded you tomorrow, what aircraft would you miss flying the most? Would it be something simple like a Cessna 150? A traveling machine like the Cirrus SR-22? Or maybe something powerful like the Pilatus PC-12 NGX? Tell me in the comments. I read every one, and your story might inspire the next video. Because in aviation, every pilot has a story worth telling.